So Jesus gives us a parable here. He gives us a story to help us understand end times. Now, a parable is a familiar story from everyday living that everyone would understand to prove a point. And here, Jesus uses a wedding because everybody would have been to a wedding and everybody would have understood in the Jewish culture the points he was making. So for our time today, remaining time that we have, let me help you understand what this meant. So a wedding had basically three parts. The first part is the betrothal period. Now, the betrothal period is the engagement, but it was much more serious than our engagement. The groom would come to the dad and he would bring a dowry. He would bring a bride price. I don't know, maybe it was 35 goats or 20 camels. And they would make an agreement together. It would be a contract. They'd make vows, the groom and the bride. But this wasn't the wedding, it was the engagement. But it was so serious that it could only be broken by a divorce. And divorce was only allowed if one of them committed adultery. And even though they had not consummated the marriage, it was still looked upon as adultery in the betrothal period. That's why when we read about Mary and Joseph in the Gospels, that Joseph was betrothed to Mary. Parents had already met. He had already paid the bride's price for Mary. They exchanged vows, had a covenant. And the Bible says Joseph was going to put Mary away quietly because he didn't want to embarrass her. He didn't want her to be judged. So the betrothal period is the first step of a Jewish wedding. And it was extremely serious and it was permanent. The second involves the bridegroom. Now, the bridegroom, after the engagement, after the betrothal, he would leave for about a year. And he would go back to his father's house and he would build on a room onto his father's house. And it's where he and his new bride were going to live. They would live together with extended families. And it would take about a year. The process would go on, and they wouldn't see each other much during this time period because the groom was preparing for his wedding. And the groom couldn't serve in any military service at this time because if he went to war and he was killed in battle, then all of a sudden you've got some problems in their culture and customs of marriage. And so he would go and he's building that home. And all the while, the bride, she's just waiting for that day. She's waiting for that day. And when the day would come, it'd be about a year later, but she wouldn't know the exact day. But there would be some hints. She would know it'd be like within a week. And during that time, all her bridesmaids came and stayed with her. And it would come and they would come at a time they didn't expect. And it would always be at night. And the groom and his best men and all his men, they would come with torches. And not like a little lamp, like a clay pot with a little wick. No, man, they would come with torches. And they would come at night, so it would just light up the sky. They would come with big fanfare. And you can imagine a bunch of young guys hooting and hollering. They'd wake up everybody in the village because they wanted everybody in the village to come. And then the bride would hear her groom. And she would go running out along with the rest of the bridesmaids. And they would come and they would escort them all the way back to the new home. And when they got there, they would throw the bride up on her shoulders and the whole village would come out and parade to this new home. And it was a big deal. And that bride would look every night and wonder, is this the night? Is he coming to get me tonight? And as the signs began to approach, she would get more eager and she would make sure she's ready. And everybody in that party, they would make sure they had oil in their lamp because they knew it was going to happen at night. And the closer it got, the more excited that she would become and listening for her groom and those shouts that it was time. And after the bridegroom came back and the wedding party, this huge torchlit parade, there would be a time of banquet, a celebration. And they got 7 days. I mean, our weddings don't last 7 hours, but 7 days of celebration and family and feasting. That's why we read in John chapter 2 about the wedding in Cana. The wedding in Cana, Jesus at a wedding, and they run out of wine. And Mary, his mom, says, hey, Jesus, go help them. And he's like, woman, my time's not come. But he ends up helping them, and he turns the water into wine. What? How could they run out of wine? One part, it was to fulfill this first miracle that Jesus performed, but also it lasted for 7 days. And they just continued to celebrate. And this was the banquet. So what's the point? Why does Jesus give us a parable about a wedding at the end of talking about end times? Well, first of all, because the betrothal, it's a picture of our salvation. It is salvation. Jesus is the groom, and he's already paid the bride price. The dowry has already been paid for you. Jesus is the groom, and the church is the bride. He has already, through his blood, paid the price that we might be married, that we might be in a relationship with God that is real and intimate and personal. He has already come. We as Christians are betrothed to Jesus, our groom, and he has paid the bride price. Secondly, we know the bridegroom, well, that's a picture of the return of Christ. We eagerly wait his return. We are the bridegroom waiting for the groom to come. And we eagerly await his return. We're waiting for his call. And what is he doing? Well, in John chapter 14, he tells us, my Father's house has many rooms. Where does the groom build his house? At his Father's house. The groom goes away and he builds a room on his Father's house. In my Father's house are many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? Jesus is preparing a place for his bride. He's gone away and he's creating something right now. How marvelous that's going to be. God is creating space for you to spend eternity with him. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. That is the picture of the groom coming back to get his bride, and he's coming back, and if he leaves, he's only going away to prepare a place for you. And if he goes away, it only means he's coming back. And he's going to come back, and he's going to take you to be where he is. He's preparing a place. What about the third? A picture of a banquet. We have the betrothal, the bridegroom, and the banquet is a picture of the wedding banquet of the Lamb. After the return of Christ, it is the marriage supper of the Lamb that we come together. He has saved us. He has paid the price. The dowry has been paid, and he's gone away to prepare a place for you, only to come back. And we will celebrate at the wedding supper of the Lamb. Jesus chose something that was so clear to the Jewish people in this culture of a wedding. Did you know that before God created the church, he created marriage? Before God created the institute of government, he created marriage. Why? Because marriage is the perfect picture of what God wanted us to see in a relationship with him. The marriage relationship is that picture of being with Christ, united with him.